After discovering that Carolina possessed the legendary power of divinity, she chose to use it to treat Prince Gilbert, whose incurable illness had trapped him inside the Diamond Palace for years. Against all expectations, the treatment proved to be a remarkable success, giving the imperial family a glimmer of hope they had long since lost. But just when everything seemed to be moving in the right direction, a series of unexpected events began to unfold, taking the story in a completely new direction. Carolina pays another visit to the Diamond Palace, expecting nothing more than Prince Gilbert's routine treatment. But the moment she steps inside, Gilbert rushes over with an excited smile, enthusiastically greeting her as mistress once again. Embarrassed, Carolina politely begs him to call her anything else, only for Gilbert to innocently insist that no title suits her better after she saved his life. Letting out a helpless sigh, Carolina notices that the once lonely room is now much brighter and tidier than before. Just as she's about to begin the day's treatment, Gilbert unexpectedly invites her to sit down for an elegant tea party instead. Completely caught off guard, Carolina quickly reminds him that she came to treat his illness, not to spend the afternoon drinking tea. To Carolina's surprise, Gilbert calmly insists that another treatment won't be necessary. For now, pulling out a strange magical device, he explains that it constantly emits mana, and the fact that he can look at it without suffering any symptoms proves Carolina's divine power is still flowing through his body. Rather than feeling relieved, Carolina is horrified that he secretly tested himself and immediately scolds him for taking such a reckless risk. Gilbert, however, remains as carefree as ever, assuring her the device contains only a tiny amount of mana that could never trigger his illness. Seeing that Carolina still isn't convinced, he flashes a mischievous smile and offers her a deal. If she agrees to stay and enjoy tea with him, he'll hand over the magical device and promise never to conduct another dangerous experiment on his own. Caught completely off guard by his unexpected bargain, Carolina has little choice but to reluctantly accept. After returning to her room, Carolina can't help but smile wryly at how little treatment actually took place. Instead of another medical session, the two had spent the entire afternoon sharing embarrassing childhood stories and laughing over each other's past mistakes. Even after spending hours with him, Carolina finds Prince Gilbert just as impossible to figure out as the mysterious magical device he showed her. The following day, she returns to resume his treatment, only to be greeted by Gilbert's usual cheerful, "Hello, mistress." Noticing something weighing on her mind, he even offers to give her advice, prompting Carolina to inwardly wonder how someone as eccentric as him could possibly be the one offering guidance. Brushing the moment aside, she politely thanks him before steering the conversation back on track, deciding it was finally time to conduct a proper examination. Carolina begins the examination by checking Gilbert's condition and quickly realizes the divine power she had previously infused into him has completely faded. Moving on to the next stage, she asks him to observe the magical device once again and describe how much mana he can perceive. Although the change is subtle, Gilbert notices that the mana appears slightly fainter than before, suggesting the treatment may already be taking effect. Even so, the improvement is far from enough. Seeing Carolina's disappointed expression, Gilbert gently reminds her that they've only just begun and that meaningful results won't appear overnight. His quiet optimism lifts Carolina's spirits, making her realize that despite being the one enduring the illness, Gilbert is the one encouraging everyone else. Renewing her determination, Carolina continues his treatment day after day, patiently working toward a complete recovery. Weeks pass in the blink of an eye as Carolina continues Gilbert's treatment without missing a single day. During another examination, she hands him the magical device as usual and anxiously asks about his condition. Gilbert remains silent for a moment, making Carolina fear the worst. Then, a gentle smile appears on his face as he reveals that his symptoms have noticeably improved. The mana that once appeared vivid to him has now become nothing more than a faint blur. Overwhelmed with relief, Carolina can hardly contain her joy, while Gilbert sincerely credits every bit of his recovery to her divine power. He once again expresses his deepest gratitude, admitting that he respects Carolina from the bottom of his heart, not only for her extraordinary gift, but for the humility and kindness with which she carries it. Still thinking about the heartfelt smile Gilbert had shown her, Carolina quietly makes her way back to her room, unable to get the image out of her mind. But the moment she opens the door, she's met with an unexpected surprise. Edward is already waiting for her. Apologizing for the unexpected visit, he admits he simply wanted to spend some time with her despite his busy schedule. Touched by the gesture, Carolina happily accepts his invitation to sit down and chat together. As the two enjoy a rare moment alone, Edward is delighted to hear that Prince Gilbert's treatment is progressing smoothly. However, his joy quickly turns to concern when he notices Carolina looking unusually distracted. Unable to ignore it, he gently encourages her to tell him what's been bothering her, reminding her that he wants to understand her better than anyone else. After gathering her courage, Carolina finally confesses that Gilbert has been calling her mistress, and his unwavering admiration has become so overwhelming that she no longer knows how to respond. The revelation catches Edward completely off guard, leaving him frozen in stunned silence as he struggles to comprehend why his own brother is addressing his wife that way. Meanwhile, Carolina can only lower her head in embarrassment, already wishing she had kept the entire matter to herself. Still unable to hide his concern, Edward carefully asks whether Gilbert's feelings are nothing more than admiration for the woman who saved his life. Though slightly confused by the question, Carolina sincerely replies that she has never sensed anything beyond respect. The answer instantly lifts the weight from Edward's shoulders. With a quiet smile, he asks her one final question that catches her completely off guard. Who does she belong to? Without the slightest hesitation, Carolina proudly declares that she is the wife of the second prince, Edward Ruby Martinez. Hearing those words is all Edward needed. His faint jealousy melts away, and with complete satisfaction, he quietly leaves the room. Meanwhile, Carolina is left utterly bewildered, wondering why he had asked such an obvious question, never realizing she had just reassured her quietly possessive husband. Later, while working alongside Theodore, Edward casually brings up Carolina's daily visits to the Diamond Palace, subtly asking how she and Gilbert have been getting along. Theodore, completely oblivious to Edward's hidden concern, simply explains that the visits are necessary for Gilbert's treatment, leaving Edward to awkwardly brush the topic aside while Theodore watches in utter confusion. Not long afterward, Theodore summons Carolina for a private meeting and gets straight to the point. Thanks to Prince Gilbert's successful return to high society, the fierce succession dispute has finally begun to calm down. However, the good news is overshadowed by an unexpected problem. Somehow, word of Carolina's daily visits to the Diamond Palace has spread among the nobility, giving rise to unpleasant rumors that threaten to undermine everything they have worked so hard to achieve. Shocked by the revelation, Carolina can hardly believe that such rumors have already spread throughout the nobility. Theodore immediately takes responsibility for the oversight and sincerely apologizes, but Carolina refuses to place the blame on him. Even so, Theodore reveals that he has already tracked down the source of the leak and vows to erase the rumors before they can spiral any further. With that matter settled, he brings up another important change. To better evaluate Prince Gilbert's recovery, the current treatment method will be replaced with an entirely new test, catching Carolina completely by surprise. Theodore explains that the next phase of Gilbert's treatment will be far more demanding. To accurately determine how much his condition has improved, Prince Gilbert must leave the Diamond Palace without any divine power remaining in his body, allowing them to measure exactly how much mana he can now withstand on his own. The risky plan immediately worries Carolina, but Theodore reassures her that he has discussed it extensively with His Holiness, and that this is the only reliable way to evaluate Gilbert's recovery. Trusting his judgment, Carolina puts aside her fears and promises to support Prince Gilbert through the next stage of his treatment, no matter what lies ahead. Just as Carolina is about to leave, Theodore suddenly stops her with one final piece of advice. Though admitting it isn't really his place to interfere, he quietly warns her not to become too close to Prince Gilbert, explaining that doing so could end up hurting someone else. The cryptic remark leaves Carolina completely bewildered. Before she can press him for an explanation, Theodore simply tells her that this is all he can say and asks her to figure out the rest on her own. Left with nothing but his mysterious warning, Carolina walks away, unable to shake the feeling that there was a deeper meaning hidden behind his words. A few days later, His Holiness Melvin personally examines Prince Gilbert and is astonished by how much his condition has improved in just a matter of weeks, praising Carolina for the remarkable progress. True to her humble nature, Carolina insists she still has a long way to go, while Gilbert once again can't resist complimenting his beloved mistress. Ignoring his praise, Carolina asks Melvin for his honest assessment, only to receive bittersweet news. Although Gilbert is now on track for a complete recovery, there is one major concern: his illness could return at any time. Melvin explains that the root of Gilbert's condition isn't mana itself, but his abnormally sensitive eyesight, which allows him to perceive mana invisible to ordinary people. Since that extraordinary sensitivity can never be completely cured, the possibility of a relapse will always remain, casting a shadow over the hope they had fought so hard to achieve. Though shaken by the possibility of a relapse, Gilbert quickly accepts the harsh reality with remarkable composure, calling it nothing more than a cruel disease he must overcome. Carolina, however, can't hide her concern and questions whether it's really safe for him to leave the Diamond Palace without the protection of her divine power. Melvin reassures her that Gilbert's symptoms have already improved enough to attempt the trial. Gilbert agrees without the slightest hesitation, declaring that if he truly wishes to become emperor one day, he can no longer spend his life hiding behind the walls of the Diamond Palace. Later that night, Theodore gathers Carolina to finalize the plan for Gilbert's biggest test yet. The following day, Prince Gilbert will leave the Diamond Palace without any divine power protecting him, escorted by the Pyreborn's finest non-magical swordsmen, while Carolina accompanies him in case anything goes wrong. After confirming every last detail, Theodore quietly remarks that everything depends on tomorrow's outcome, leaving Carolina puzzled by the weight of his words and unable to shake the feeling that far more than Gilbert's treatment is at stake. The next morning, Carolina arrives at the Diamond Palace to escort Prince Gilbert for the long-awaited test, and Gilbert gratefully accepts the escort as they prepare to leave. Elsewhere, Edward can barely hide his restlessness. Unable to stop thinking about Carolina, he asks Theodore how she's been doing. Theodore immediately points out that asking him is pointless and that Edward should speak to Carolina himself. Edward admits things have felt awkward between them lately and that he's afraid of saying something that might hurt her. Hearing this, Theodore offers a rare piece of heartfelt advice, reminding Edward that avoiding conflict isn't always an act of kindness. Sometimes the people dearest to us need honesty, even if it hurts. Realizing exactly what he needs to do, Edward wastes no time, rushing straight toward the Diamond Palace to meet Carolina, while Theodore watches him leave with a quiet smile, hoping everything will finally fall into place. Before long, Carolina escorts Prince Gilbert out of the Diamond Palace, where the elite Pyreborn knights stand ready to protect him with their lives. As the massive gates slowly open, Carolina sees nothing unusual beyond them, but she can't help wondering what the outside world looks like through Gilbert's eyes. The moment he steps beyond the palace walls, his vision suddenly blurs and a sharp pain surges through his body as countless streams of mana flood his senses all at once. Alarmed by his condition, Carolina immediately rushes to his side, but despite the obvious pain, Gilbert forces a smile and insists he's still able to continue, even as every step becomes a battle against his own body. Seeing Gilbert struggle, Carolina immediately insists on ending the test and returning to the safety of the Diamond Palace. But Gilbert refuses to back down, determined not to let this opportunity slip away. Carolina repeatedly begs him not to push himself, reminding him they can always try again another day. Even so, Gilbert simply smiles and playfully calls her a worrywart, explaining that the sudden pain is only because it's been so long since he faced such an overwhelming amount of mana. Despite his reassurance, his condition continues to deteriorate before Carolina's eyes. Just as she prepares to call the entire test off, Gilbert's pain suddenly worsens, leaving Carolina desperately rushing to support him before he collapses. Just as Gilbert leans on Carolina for support, fate delivers the worst possible misunderstanding. Edward arrives at that exact moment, and the first thing he sees is Carolina cradling his older brother in her arms. His mind instantly goes blank. Before he can hear a single explanation, jealousy twists the scene into something it isn't, making him imagine Gilbert stealing away the woman he loves. Completely unaware of Edward's presence, Carolina remains focused on Gilbert, desperately urging him to end the test before his condition worsens. Then, the thunder of galloping hooves shatters the tense silence. Edward leaps off his horse, marches straight toward them, forcefully pulls Gilbert away from Carolina, grabs her by the hand, and, consumed by a storm of jealousy and panic, declares that she's coming with him, right now. Completely caught off guard, Carolina tries to remind Edward that Gilbert's examination isn't over yet, but Edward cuts her off, declaring that none of it matters anymore. In his desperation, he pulls her away so abruptly that she cries out in pain. Only after putting some distance between them does Edward finally begin to realize what he's done. Meanwhile, a confused Carolina desperately tries to understand why he's so upset, even apologizing in case she had unknowingly hurt him. But Edward remains silent, torn between the jealousy raging inside him and his desire to always treat Carolina gently. Finally, unable to suppress his emotions any longer, he asks the question that has been tormenting him all this time, whether she has fallen in love with his older brother. Overcome by insecurity, Edward even admits that compared to the kind and gentle Gilbert, he sees himself as nothing more than a rough and distant man, believing he couldn't blame Carolina if she had chosen someone else. Carolina is left completely speechless, immediately denying that she could ever have feelings for Prince Gilbert. But Edward, blinded by the painful scene he had just witnessed, can't stop himself from asking why she had been holding his brother so closely. Before Carolina can properly explain, Edward's emotions finally overflow. Believing he might lose the woman he loves, he painfully admits that if Carolina truly wished to be with Gilbert, he would even accept a divorce. Then, with nothing left to hide, he pours out every feeling he has kept locked away. He confesses that he loves Carolina more than anyone else in the world, so deeply that the mere sight of her with another man fills him with fear and unbearable jealousy. Overcome with emotion, the fearless commander who never flinches on the battlefield finally lowers his guard, calling himself nothing more than a pathetic man hopelessly in love. A warm smile finally appears on Carolina's face as she gently clears away every one of Edward's fears. Without the slightest hesitation, she confesses that the only man she has ever loved is him. To her, no one could ever replace the kind prince who accepted her, protected her, and always stood by her side. Those heartfelt words completely melt Edward's insecurities, leaving him overwhelmed with relief. Wanting to close the distance between them forever, he shyly asks Carolina to stop calling him Prince Edward and simply call him Ed, just like an ordinary husband. Blushing, Carolina happily agrees, but only if he calls her Lena in return. The two exchange their new nicknames with bashful smiles before confessing their love once again. This time, with no misunderstandings left between them, they quietly embrace and share a heartfelt kiss, finally becoming the loving couple they had always longed to be. Meanwhile, after being pushed aside, Gilbert lets out a bittersweet smile and admits he always knew Carolina would never be his, so he decided to be a little mischievous before letting her go. Just then, Theodore suddenly appears and bluntly remarks that Gilbert has taken his little game too far. Gilbert immediately tries to brush it off by reminding Theodore that he's still a patient suffering from mana hypersensitivity syndrome, but Theodore calmly responds that he already knows that before dropping a far more suspicious remark. Gilbert's illness is almost completely cured, leaving the prince genuinely caught off guard. Theodore exposes Gilbert's bluff, revealing that he showed no reaction to the teleportation magic, proving his illness had already recovered far more than he claimed. With a smile, Gilbert admits he was careless and asks when Theodore figured it out. Theodore explains that Melvin's medical report never matched Gilbert's unusually slow recovery, before dropping one final bombshell. He also accuses Gilbert of being the one who deliberately spread the rumors about Carolina's visits to the Diamond Palace. Surprised that Theodore uncovered the truth so quickly, Gilbert asks how he figured it out. Theodore calmly explains that no one else had any reason to spread those rumors since they would only damage both factions, making Gilbert the only logical culprit. Although he sees through Gilbert's scheme, one question still remains unanswered. Was he trying to drive Edward and Carolina apart? Or did he spread the rumors to push the overly reserved prince into finally confessing his feelings? Whatever the truth, Theodore admits that, in the end, everything worked out for the best. Later that night, Gilbert seeks out Edward and Carolina for one final meeting, determined to reveal the truth once and for all. Still unable to forgive everything that had happened earlier, Edward instinctively pulls Carolina closer to his side and coldly demands to know Gilbert's purpose. With a calm smile, Gilbert begins by confessing that he had deceived everyone about his mana hypersensitivity syndrome. Thanks to Carolina's divine power, his illness had already been cured, and he also admits that provoking Edward's jealousy had been completely intentional. After sincerely apologizing for all the trouble he caused, Gilbert quietly asks for one last selfish request. Then, with nothing left to hide, he bares his heart and confesses his love for Carolina, leaving the couple utterly speechless. But Gilbert continues without hesitation, pouring out everything he had kept hidden in his heart. He tells her that he fell in love with her kindness, her sincerity, and even the little moments they shared together. Yet despite those feelings, the only thing he ever wished for was to see her smile. Touched by his honesty, Carolina gently but firmly rejects his confession, declaring that the only man she has ever loved and ever will love is Edward Ruby Martinez. Hearing those unwavering words, Edward is left completely flustered, while Gilbert quietly smiles to himself, grateful that the love he could never fulfill had finally been brought to a proper end. With no regrets left in his heart, he apologizes one last time. With nothing left to say, Carolina politely excuses herself, and the couple quietly begin walking away together. As they disappear into the distance, Gilbert softly whispers that he's leaving Carolina in Edward's hands. Those heartfelt words stop Edward in his tracks for a brief moment, though he simply brushes it off when Carolina asks what happened. Watching the two from behind, Gilbert smiles with a mixture of sadness and relief before admitting that, as much as he hates to say it, Edward is the only man capable of making Carolina truly happy. Meanwhile, far away in the Kingdom of Celestia, a far more dangerous storm begins to brew. As King Nathan and Duke Raymond discuss Flora's recent failure in the saintly trials, Archbishop Jonathan suddenly arrives with an urgent revelation. He boldly declares that Flora was never the true reason behind Celestia's prosperity. Instead, the kingdom had unknowingly been sustained by Carolina's overwhelming divine power all along, and her departure is the real cause of the disasters now spreading across the nation. The shocking truth leaves the king speechless. But Jonathan isn't finished yet. With undeniable confidence, he proposes a plan that could throw both kingdoms into chaos. They must reclaim Carolina for the sake of Celestia.